Hey, it's Soul, with some more podcasty commentary on the World of Warcraft. If you'd like to support these kinds of videos, it starts with pressing that like button somewhere over there, and to subscribe if you want a regular dose of videos like these and all things Warcraft. I'm revisiting the topic of World of Warcraft's story, which has plenty of great moments and interesting world building, but I take issue with its pacing and momentum. So today we're going to take our time setting up a narrative, and by that I mean I have a lot to say and it's hopelessly disorganized. So I guess I'll summarize before I get lost in my usual bloviating. World of Warcraft's story is moving way too fast, and it skips too much of what could be some really great story and gameplay. It's moving so fast, actually, that it risks compromising the feel of immersion as we're shuffled between zones and continents and worlds, as well as roles that we play in the world. And it threatens to totally lose players who take some short breaks. Like if someone were to quit during Cataclysm and then they came back and now, all of a sudden you're in World of Warcraft hell. Gotcha. Okay. By the end of this, I hope to get you on the same page as me when I say that, for the sake of World of Warcraft's long-term survival, the current story has to end, and it's gotta stop trying to be so epic. For this exercise, I'm going to divide the World of Warcraft story into two arcs, and I will now segue. The first arc of the World of Warcraft, which obviously began with vanilla, covers the world building of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and then it sends us to the shattered world of Outland. It spins back to confront the Lich King over in Northrend, and it concludes with the breaking of the world and preventing the upcoming Cataclysm. The first few parts of this arc sets the stage to introduce or reintroduce us to the Warcraft franchise, which before had only existed, for the most part, as the real-time strategy game. Numerous new characters and seeds were planted during this period with plot points and events that would follow us for years to come. This arc closed the book on a couple of major beats, or at least we thought it did at the time. Illidan and Arthas, they were dispatched, chapters to be closed and archived onto the shelf of history. By Cataclysm, seeds began to bear fruit, with the likes of the Titan lore and Garrosh Hellscream and the return of Varian Wrynn just prior. The tail end of this expansion, it did take a few over-the-top turns. Consider what the final chapters entailed, refusing the apparitions of Thrall, the temporary Earthwarder, and going on what was basically a time heist to borrow/steal the Dragon Soul and use it to destroy Deathwing, draining the immortal powers of the dragon aspects and ushering in this new age, the so-called Age of Mortals. This arc ends with us as the obvious hero, a murder hobo with the one-track mindedness of popping bloodlust and charging into the next dangerous thing. But things start to really ramp up once we begin the second arc, which is a better, if not unimaginative segue. Thank you very much. The second arc, which I suppose should be called the Age of Mortals, started innocently enough with the Mist of Pandaria expansion, and it continues up to this day. Mist began with a furious exchange between the rival factions, and then we arrive in a strange new land and bear creatures. It played out like the opening of a brand new game, as if it really was World of Warcraft 2.0. Actually, I vaguely remember some of the hype being sold in such a way that Mist was meant to be a return to adventuring and exploration. We can sort of visualize this as if the journey from vanilla to Cataclysm was like this upward slope, with Deathwing's defeat as the climax, and, after cresting it, experience, we kind of come down to a more grounded story before we begin this upward climb yet again. I didn't quite know what to expect out of this expansion, and I was surprised toward the end. I think Mists succeeded with the freshness, despite it being overshadowed by Garrosh Hellscream's ambition, which only grew since Cataclysm. But the end of MoP also marked the beginning of a trend that would persist to this day, a practice where one expansion almost immediately connects to the next. On paper, this sort of mandate doesn't sound so bad, but in practice, it set the World of Warcraft down a path that I look at and feel like it's gotten out of control. present World of Warcraft is still climbing that narrative hill, when at several occasions we could have had that kind of climax and reset. So let's review. Mists of Pandaria ends with Garrosh Hellscream in chains, but later shenanigans that took place in a book, that's kind of a side critique there, lead us to Warlords of Draenor. Warlords of Draenor ends with the defeat of Archimonde and Gul'dan being flung into the twisting nether, only to be spat out so he could begin the events of World of Warcraft Legion. Legion ends with a sword in Azeroth's back, causing Azerite to bubble up, sparking the events that would begin the battle for Azeroth. The final battle between Saurfang and Sylvanas and her victory/defeat leads directly into the breaking of the Veil and the Shadowlands expansion. Oh, and what's his name? Oh, and the Zoth was defeated too, but that was just a side story. Or did you not know? This so-called Age of Mortals plays out more like an age of infinite conflict because from expansion to expansion, the story has been accelerating. What's at stake grew exponentially greater, more epic, until, like the gear, epic started to lose meaning. During Cataclysm, Deathwing could have been the end of Azeroth, I give you that. But not long after, our heroes are thrust into what we can look back on as one throwaway role after another, and more outlandish feats. My character became the de facto leader of the expedition on Draenor as Garrison Commander, and then suddenly thrown into this role of leader of the Order Hall, wielding a weapon of incredible power. And keep in mind, we still don't have a place to really call home, even though we're the leader of this base, and well, anyway. With no pomp and circumstance, at the end of Legion, we just abandoned that role to be the right hand of our faction leaders, and then became the very, very special champion of Azeroth, who is among the first to escape the inescapable Maw, followed by befriending the most ancient of ancients, and now we cosplay sort of like them. My opinion, but that's just really, really fast, isn't it? And thanks to expansion features, another side critique, we're unable to appreciate the growth of our characters because in 2 years, we get sucked into something else, and those powers and perks and growth that we enjoyed don't follow us. It's very disconnecting. But to some of you, maybe this is just fine. This isn't our story, this is the story of Warcraft, and we're just along for the ride, playing our parts as champions. Story, like art, is subjective. Expansion features let developers go wild with the possibilities, knowing that they won't be a burden later. Whether we enjoy that is everybody's opinion. But here's what's fact. The story of World of Warcraft continues to climb this upward trend of encountering greater powers, the big bad behind the big bad behind the big bad. A quick succession of events from the shores of Pandaria to the seat of the Pantheon. Our characters go through this fast track of fame and renown. This train keeps running out of tracks, and the Blizzard riders have been frantically laying down more when really trains can, make a stop and refuel and let passengers disembark and hop on, that sort of thing. Right now, those things are happening while the train is moving full speed, and I'm dragging this analogy train thing way too long. What do I mean by ending the current story? I don't mean dropping 16 years of lore in favor of a World of Warcraft 2. I hate to break it to you folks, but we're on World of Warcraft 9. I also don't exactly mean a spontaneous and sudden time skip when we return from our cosmic adventures in the Shadowlands to see 200 years had passed on Azeroth. I mean, it sounds cool, but I find that extremely risky and unnecessary. This arc, this Age of Mortals, or whatever the hell you want to call it, just needs to end. If it were to end in the Shadowlands, that means finally ending the story of Sylvanas Windrunner, and to put a pause on these cosmic threats. Shadowlands helped establish that the known universe has existed for countless eons, so there's no need to rush, right? If this arc can end with the current threat over, the world can take a moment. Okay, actually not a moment, it can take maybe a whole expansion for the world to breathe and react and to catch up to past events. This might not sound very sensical, so let's look at what could have been done between previous expansions. The time period between Legion and Battle for Azeroth is a pretty easy example, given that the very last scene after completing the last raid makes it super clear that there's, an immediate threat to handle. So it's a bit of a surprise that the narrative shifted to the Horde and Alliance turning on each other in total war. I think that could have played out better. Or slower. In fact, I think an entire expansion's worth of content could be built just around Sargeras' final acts before his defeat. Obviously, there's a giant corrupted sword in Silithus, but also there's a scene where, just before this, Sargeras is kind of spooning Azeroth like a panda and its favorite ball. Instead of assuming that nothing else happened to Azeroth, we could have explored the idea that Sargeras, juiced up with his fell energy, corrupted numerous chunks of Azeroth with just his touch, let alone, the attack on Silithus. World of Warcraft, the Mark of Sargeras. Something like that, sure. We could see a mini-world revamp, with some zones mutilated or fell corrupted. How about a new zone, shaped like Sargeras' hand or palm or whatever, where it rested and it evaporated parts of an entire ocean, so we have this sort of partially submerged zone filled with fell creatures, corrupted sea life, and maybe a lost piece of the old Night Elf civilization. And instead of the sword just evaporating most life on Silithus, maybe instead it can turn the life in the zone, even remaking the temple and the ruins of Ahn'Qiraj into revamped raid instances. Remnants of the Burning Legion who escaped Argus on ships will still threaten Azeroth, they're still flying around, right? Along with them, worshippers and cultists loyal to the Legion could make up our villains and are trying to restart the Burning Crusade from Azeroth, which is kind of weird because they're already there, but During this time, as we heroes try to heal the damage caused by Sargeras, that is when Azeroth begins to bubble and coalesce, and that could be what later leads us to the Battle for Azeroth expansion. Obviously, I left out tons of details, but so much can be stretched out and made into full-on expansions to build context, impact, meaning to the story that we only just completed. I admit that with an example like this, we're seeing more of an extended epilogue of the Legion story than a reset. So here's another one for fun. After Battle for Azeroth, Sylvanas scurried off and, N'Zoth was defeated. And that's it. That alone could have been the resting point where, again, we can turn towards healing Azeroth, fighting off bad guys, trying to harness dormant energies from Sargeras' sword maybe exploring the Dragon Isles to find a way to get rid of the sword, visiting other Titan facilities to trigger some non-threatening regeneration cycle that will stop the Azerite from flowing. Maybe there's a far-off continent where the remnants of the Burning Legion are regrouping, and the threat isn't that they're going to attack, but they're digging in to make a permanent residence. I can imagine an expansion that doesn't necessarily lead to some grand climax or a huge big bad and the threat of everything ending, but more of what I really like about the World of Warcraft stories, hopping horizontally from one adventure to the next. But that's all hindsight, it's all woulda, coulda, shoulda. We're in Shadowlands now, and I'd like to see the end of Shadowlands be the grand climax to this arc, with Sylvanas making her final curtain call. Whether it's her being decapitated, or she rides off into the sunset wherever Kerrigan is for a permanent vacation. I just think it's time for the franchise to let her go. And more importantly, to set the story on a path back to Azeroth and a bit more grounded of a story. Now, the writing is on the wall for more crazy stuff. There's the inevitable confrontation between the light and the void. We still have Azeroth plus sword. We have Yrel from AU Draenor, who kind of foreshadows a future visit or an invasion from the Naaru. Xal'atath and Queen Ashara are still at large. The Burning Legion was shattered, but it wasn't annihilated. The Pantheon and Illidan are who knows where, but they can always return, and Khadgar is still reading books. That's a lot to cover, and some of it is pretty urgent, notably the sword, but as a player, I just really, really don't want to deal with the end of everything again, at least not for a little while. This is fan fiction, but I would love to see the end of Shadowlands and our champions are, standing at their capital cities. They're looking at the Horde Council or Anduin/Turalyon, whoever. They say something to acknowledge the countless deeds for our respective factions and for Azeroth, and these NPCs will offer us a seat at the table, or to be a right hand, or at least they would make this offer, but they know that our place is out there somewhere, helping out others on our travels and homeless. What I want is for the Warcraft story to open up instead of escalate, to feel just a little bit less stressful, for the feeling of urgency to be no less dangerous, but not quite as involved. And I want my character to stop being thrust into the next major global conflict. I want to feel uncertain at the end of the expansion. I want to feel uncertain as to where the next adventure is going to take me. That idea sounds really exciting. As a company, Blizzard Entertainment has a number of core values, and the one at the very top is gameplay first. But in the world of Warcraft, where gameplay and story are supposed to be very, very closely interconnected, I feel that they could do better.